Last year was a very exciting time for the Denver Zoo. We had our very first Malayan tapir birth, and it didn't go quite as smoothly as planned. It was significant for Denver Zoo because we hadn't done it before. It was a first-time mom, a first-time dad, so it was a really exciting time for us and for the population at large. And in the U.S. and AZ institutions, it's a pretty small population, so we were very excited to contribute those genetics. We didn't know exactly when we could expect the baby, so we were prepared as early as March to maybe get the baby, and he wasn't born until September, so that was quite a wait for us. We had seen some very subtle signs. We had never done this here at Denver Zoo, so we weren't sure exactly what we were seeing, but we knew we were seeing something. So not wanting to miss it and erring on the side of caution, I stayed late with one of the vets, Gwen Jankowski, Dr. Gwen Jankowski, and we watched with the closed-circuit television that was closed-circuit camera that was attached in the stall, so we could monitor her behavior. I waited there watching the camera for probably about 3 hours with nothing happening, and I wasn't sure if it was going to happen. What ended up happening is she had a very quick labor, so we could see her laying down, we could see some contractions, we could see some pushing, and in a very short time period, she had the baby, it landed on the ground, she walked away, and we could see that it had been born. We saw the baby move several times, it twitched. We could tell that it was alive at the time of birth. And as we watched, we got a little bit more and more concerned. Since Rinny was a first-time mother, she wasn't sure exactly what to do. She walked over, she sniffed it, she was interested in it, but she didn't know how to clean it off of the birth sac. And as we watched the baby, we watched her poke around and try to figure out what to do, and we watched the baby move less and less and less over time, and we ended up watching for probably 3 to 4 minutes before we actually decided that we needed to intervene. So we were getting a little bit nervous that she wasn't moving fast enough, Rinny wasn't taking care of her side of the bargain, so we quickly asked Rinny to shift into another stall, which very luckily she did with no hesitation. We shifted her into a different stall, and then Dr. Gwen Jankowski and I ran into that stall and tore open the birth sac, which was the primary problem, that the baby wasn't able to breathe because it was still encased in that birth sac. It can happen with any mammalian birth. An experienced mother will know how to rip the sac open herself by chewing and biting and creating a hole and ripping it open, but it's not uncommon for an inexperienced mother to not understand what she needs to do in that situation. It was a very nerve-wracking time. We knew that the baby was potentially in distress. We hadn't seen it move in what seemed like a very long time. So we rushed in, I poked the sac open around its mouth area and ripped the sac open. Gwen came in, she was cleaning out his nasal passage and his mouth to make sure there wasn't any debris in there. And then just as soon as I could get my hands on him, I knew we needed to get air into the lungs. That was priority number one. So I just opened his mouth, pulled his tongue out, and made as good a seal as possible with my mouth to his mouth, and blew as hard as I felt like I could without potentially injuring him. So I gave him some good quick breaths, and from there we waited. We stimulated him by touching and rubbing his skin and trying to get him to rouse that way. I reached down, I gave him another couple of breaths, and luckily we started to see him expand, and it was a very raspy breath, but as soon as he took that first breath, I was slightly relieved. So we wanted to wait long enough and be sure that he was going to continue that and that he didn't have any residual obstructions or fluid in his lungs. So we continued to try to keep him warm, try to keep him stimulated, make sure he was breathing. And then after about 15 minutes, we thought, okay, that's enough. We've done everything that we can. We scooted out, we shut the door and allowed Rinny back into the stall. She was immediately very interested in him. She came over and gave him a sniff. He twitched a little bit. She startled and backed off. She'd never done this before. It's all brand new to her. So she was understandably a little bit shocked that she had just produced this thing. But very quickly she calmed down, she settled down, the baby calmed down and started nursing, and that to us was really the signal to relax, that she did have it under control and she understood what was going to happen. Well, once he started nursing that first time, we could not stop him from nursing anymore. He was a fool for eating. He absolutely loved it, and he gained weight at an incredibly rapid pace. I mean, hundreds of pounds in his first few months. He very soon got to a point that he was eating solid foods. He would still come to mom for comfort and try to suckle, but she pretty much didn't let him do it. And that's really common with tapirs. They mature very quickly and then they're on their own. So we were seeing those behaviors, and we had a recommendation to send him to another zoo. So just as soon as we could, we sent him to Henry Dorley Zoo. They had a fantastic exhibit, empty, ready, and waiting for him. Community resources are essential to the zoo. They provide the zoo the opportunity to give us the training that we need to approach emergency situations like this.